So this is part 2 from chapter 8 about stocks. And remember, we're primarily focusing on 4 models. We talked last part about the PE ratio, and now we have 3 other models that deal with kind of dividend valuation. So if we look at a preferred stock, if you remember, preferred stock has fixed dividends. So let's go over what some of these variables mean. So we have P. P stands for price in all of these problems. And of course, 0 means that's the time. So 0 would be today, 1 would be 1 year, 2 years, and so on. The D stands for dividends. Okay. And then of course there's infinity. So when you look at a preferred stock, it means we're gonna assume that the dividends are gonna stay fixed forever. Okay. So D of 1, dividend 1 year from now is 231, 231, 231. Okay, that's it. Now, so the stock price, the value, is the present value of all the dividends discounted back at whatever rate of return you wanted to make. So there is only one price for a stock, but if I'm looking at this company, I may think, well, I'm only going to invest in it if I think I can make 10%. Another investor may say, well, only if I can make 8% or 12%. So we would all have kind of different valuations. We'd all have different prices on it. And so whatever the current price is, in this case is at $23.75, you would say, okay, based on that price, it's over, under, or at what I think it's valued. Okay. So if an investor expects a 10% return, if I said, okay, for this stock, I know I'm going to get all of these dividends, okay, what would be the most I would be willing to pay for this stock if I wanted to get a 10% rate of return? So that's on your page right there. Notice it says zero growth model. So this is the first model called zero growth. Zero growth means the growth of the dividend is not changing. It's zero. It stays the same. Fixed. So zero growth is another way of saying we're going to look at preferred stocks. Okay? So if we look at a chart, we would say here's time and here's dividends. Basically, it's a flat line, same amount. Okay. So answer this question. It's a very simple calculation. So here's what we know. If the dividend is $2.31, because it's not going to change, and my R, so R is going to be rate of return. It's kind of like the I that we've been using, IY. It's going to be 10%. Okay. What do you think the price is going to be? What could you do with those two numbers that would give you, that says, now here's a clue, because this comes from chapter 5 and 6. It's going to pay the 231 forever, perpetually. How much would you be willing to pay for this? So you've already done this question in quiz 2, and most of you got it right. So how do you do it? Here's the formula. You divide the two. Dividend divided by R equals price. So there's the model. You can write that formula down. P of 0 means price today divided by the dividend. Equals dividend divided by the rate of return. Okay? So 2.3 divided by 10% is $23.10. So it has a current price of $23.75. The most you're willing to pay is $23.10 if you want to make a 10% return, right? That's it. That's now the second model. So we're going to do 4. We did the PE. We did the zero growth. We're now moving on to the second one on your page there. It says constant growth model. So constant growth model. So I'm going to draw a chart again. So this is time. This is dividend. The first one we looked at, zero growth, stays flat. The next one we're looking at is a constant growth. So it's a straight upward line, meaning that it's going to grow at the same percentage every year forever. The third one could look something like that. And then it grows at a straight line. Okay? So this is the zero growth right here. This is constant. And then this is non-constant. Okay? Non-constant. Anyway, okay. So notice here on this chart we have price of 0 equals D of 1, D of 2, and so on. Now, with common stock, the dividends can change. And then the 1 divided by R is like 1 plus the interest rate, 1 plus the rate of return. This is the present value calculation that we've been talking about all along. So we're going to take the present value of all the future dividends. So the first thing we have to do is figure out what are all these dividends. So we're going to assume that the dividends grow at a constant rate. We call that rate G for grow. That's the growth rate. So how do we calculate the future dividends? Well, we have to be given some dividend at some point in time to be able to figure out what the future or past dividends are. So if we're given D of 0, which means the dividend the company like just paid. So this is like often in the terminology you'll see it say just paid. So we get D of 1. So imagine if this is $1 and if our G is 5%, what would be our D of 1? It'd be $1.05. How do we get that? We multiply 1 times 1 plus 0.05, which is 1.05, and we get 105. This is all future value numbers that we did in time value money. To get the second year, we multiply by 1.05 squared, 1.5 over the third, and so on. And you can keep doing it. Now, imagine how much that work would be if you had to do this forever. Of course, you're not going to be able to do it forever. So since you're doing the same thing over and over, this fortunately condenses down into one simple formula. There it is again. You're going to take the future dividend divided by 1 plus the rate of return. Once again, pretty complicated, but fortunately this all comes down to D1, dividend 1 year from now, divided by R minus G, the rate of return minus the growth rate. And that's the main formula. So you can write that formula in there. Now, you could look at it as two parts, because what happens if you're only given D of 0? Because this is what's going to happen on a lot of these problems. We'll practice them here in a minute. Sometimes you'll get D of 0. Sometimes you might get D of 1. So if you get D of 1, you can go right to this formula. If you got D of 0, you're going to have to go to this formula first, which gets you to this formula. Okay? Because to get the price today, we always need to know what the dividend is 1 year from now. And if this is price, if I said, what's the price in year 8, then I need to get the dividend in year 9. If I want to know what the price is in year 20, I need to know the dividend in year 21. At least if we're using this model. Okay? There's always a 1 year difference between this number and this number. Okay, so here's the problem. It's right on your sheet, the bottom of the sheet. Cisco just paid $3. They expect to grow at a constant rate of 4%. Okay. If your rate of return is 10%, what do you think, how much should you be willing to pay for the stock? And I'll give you a clue. The answer is 50 or 52. You should at least get one of those. Okay, so one of them, of course, is wrong, one's correct. So put me on pause and then answer that question as best you can. Okay, so you remember I said, and I have keywords here are underlined, just pay. So that tells you that this is D of 0, not D of 1. So some of you used $3, then you're only going to get $50, which was not correct. So we need to figure out what D of 1 is. So D of 1 is going to be $3, and it's going to grow, there's G, at 4%. So we're going to take 3 times 1.04, that gives you 312, and that is D of 1. So the formula says we take 312, D of 1, divided by 10%, and we get the price of 52. Okay? Next problem. Gordon Growth Company is expected to pay a dividend. So we're at the very bottom of your page. Same kind of problem. I want you to go ahead and put me on pause and try to solve it. All right, so here we have, notice underline word, expected to pay a $4 dividend next period. So we're going to assume periods, if you doesn't specify, just assume we're dealing with years. So this is going to be your D of 1. Right there, D of 1. So we just plug $4 in, R minus G, 16 and 6, and you get a number of 40. That's it. What is the price expected to be in year 4? there's a couple ways you can do it. I want you to put me on pause and try to figure that out. Okay, so there's a couple ways you can do it. The way I'm going to just show you, because we talked about this before, we're looking for price in year 4. And remember what I said about the price and the dividend in that formula. There's always a 1-year difference. So we need to find the dividend 1 year past the price. So we need to figure out D of 5. So how could we figure out D of 5? Well, if we know dividend of year 1, because we have that back here, $4, well, that was given. Okay. And we multiply it by the growth rate to the power of 4, because we're going from year 1 to year 5. Okay. So it'd be 4 times 1.06 to the 4th. I'm not sure what that is, top of my head. And then we divide it by the same 16 minus 6%, and we would get a price of $50.50. So that would be the price in year 4. Okay, turn your page over. We have another question. I want you to go ahead and read that. So we're just practicing. This is kind of review from the other question. So go ahead and put me on pause and go for it. Okay, so simple question here. The dividend is 5. Okay, it's going to stay the same because it's preferred stock. So it stays flat. There's your R. And then there's the simple formula. D divided by R equals P. Okay, that's it. Another practice problem. Go for it. Right on your page. Notice the highlighted word. By the way, don't highlight these on your quiz. But I'm kind of giving you clues of things to warn you about how to change. Quarterly dividend. And we're dealing with an annual basis. So what would you do there? So since we're getting quarterly of 250, so we're going to say, okay, we're getting 4 of those in a year. So basically in a year, per year, we're getting $10. And the stock is trading, the price is at 50. So how can we figure out the R? Well, we've never done one like this, but we do know that price equals dividend divided by R. So you're given the dividend and you're given the price. How do you solve for R? Well, just some basic algebra here. We're going to switch these two. The R comes on this side, and then you have 10 divided by 50 and equals 20%. So there it is on the nice cleaner page there. Okay. So your formula for R in this case would be D divided by P equals R. So maybe you could write that off to the side there. Okay, once again, another practice problem right there on your sheet, McKenna Motors. So put me on pause. Now this one, once again, we haven't done one exactly like that. We're solving for G. So really, this is an algebra question. You're given all of these variables with the exception of G. Can you get G by itself? And that's going to take you back a few grades before probably college when you were doing some algebra, trying to figure out how to maneuver all the numbers. So for those of you who don't like math, are not going to be really crazy about this one. Those of you who do like math, it's going to be a good challenge. So put me on pause and try to solve for that. And I'll give you a clue. The answer is 6%. See if you can get 6%. Pause, go. Okay, so here's the math. I'm not going to go through it. You can pause this if you want, and you can kind of follow everything that I did there. So the answer is 6%. So once again, another problem right there on your sheet. So put me on pause, read through it, see if you can figure it out. All right, so remember, this is D of 0, just paid. It's like saying D today, yesterday, multiply it by 1 plus the growth rate, 1 plus G. D of 1 is 230, plug it into the formula, and there you have 57.5. Okay, just more practice, constant growth. Okay. Take it up another notch here. We have what if the dividend was paid in 10 years from now? So once again, a lot of times with time value problems, there's a couple ways to do this. So on the handout, on the outline, it's not as clear as what I'm asking as what I have here on the page. So what I'm meaning to say is, what is the value of the stock today if the dividend of $2 starts at the end of year 10. So that means the $2 is right there, really, in year 11. So at the end of year 10 is the same thing as at the beginning of year 11. So how much is the stock worth today? So we're looking at P of 0. So we need to bring whatever the value of the stock is in year 11 back to today. So how could we determine the stock in year 11? Well, we basically already calculated that right here. We said if the dividend D of 0 is $2, the price at 0, price of 0, is $57.50. So wherever we start that dividend of $2, the price would be $57.50 because we've done all of this math in here. Okay? So right here, we could put $57.50. Now we're just saying, okay, we're not going to get any money in here. We just want to figure out what is this $57.50 worth today? What would I be willing to pay for it? And that's assuming I want to make a 19% rate of return. 19% rate of return. So that means I'm going to bring this back at 19%. So we can either divide this by 1.19 to the 11th, since it's 11 years, that's the formula way, or we can plug it into our time value money calculator. This would be future value, this would be N, 19 would be IY, calculate present value, and you should get, I believe, $8.48. Okay? All right, so we've now done 3 out of the 4 models. 3 out of the 4 models. Now, once again, I want to remind you that here's what we've done. We have the 0 growth, which means the dividend, this is time and this is dividend, it stays flat, or okay, it doesn't grow. Then we have one that says, okay, it's just going to grow at a constant rate. It's going to go up X% each year. And then we have what's called a supernormal or non-constant. So it could change, but eventually, for the sake of whenever analysts are valuing companies or stocks, at some point you have to say, okay, look, we might have a good idea what's going to happen in the next 3 years, maybe 5 years, but after that, we're just going to have to make an assumption that it's going to kind of grow at a certain rate forever. Even though that can change dramatically, as I'll show you here in a minute. But our examples are primarily going to go like this. Okay, we think it's going to grow really fast. We just took off, fairly new business, and then we're going to have to say, okay, look, we're going to assume it's going to grow at a constant rate forever. So when we do that, we've really got 2 problems here. We have this supernormal growth period right here, and then we have this constant growth right here. So for the second part, we're going to use the same formula that we just got done doing, that D divided by R minus G formula. That's the constant growth model, and we're going to apply that to this section of all the future dividends. And then this part, because it might be different each year, we're just going to take the present value of each of those and bring them back. So once again, all we're doing is taking the present value of all the future dividends, and we're bringing them back to today. So it just gets a little bit more complicated. So you can kind of read what I have there on that slide. And just want to show you just some different growth rates of companies. Here's Apple, and I know it's only 2015. It's all I could get. But I just wanted to show you that after they introduced this iPhone, look what happened. I mean, there were times they thought Apple would go bankrupt. This is their Apple's revenue growth. So here's 50 billion. Look how little it did for like 20 some years. And then they introduced the iPhone right there, and wow, whole new company. Here's Apple's net income from 2005 to 2019. So here's like the supernormal growth period after the iPhone really took off, and then it's leveled off. It even went down here a year from 18 to 19. Okay? So the growth rate has really slowed quite a bit for Apple, because you imagine it's like $2 trillion company. You can't keep doubling all the time like they were doing up here. Look, 3 to 6, they doubled their income, net income. Here they're growing like 4 or 10% at the most. Okay? And here's Apple's stock. So if we look at 2009, is that what I have here? I'm sorry, 2005. So we go to 2005, which is right here, okay? And we go to 2000, this is 2019, go to right here, you can see how much the stock has grown in that period. Now it's really taken off here recently. Here's Amazon. Net income from Amazon. Amazon, not even that long ago, was still losing money. There was years that they were making a little bit of money, but now Amazon has really taken off. They've really hit that point where they're covering their expenses very well. And here's Amazon stock. So look what Amazon stock's done here. You can see a correlation between income and stock price. Income and stock price. And keep in mind that I don't even think Amazon's paying a dividend. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. You say, well, how do we use these formulas if you have a company that doesn't pay dividends? Well, because what analysts would do is they say, okay, what if the company could pay dividends? Because what happened is they're making earnings per share, and those earnings could be available for dividends. If you remember at the very beginning, last lecture, I told you that when a company makes income, they can either pay it out in dividends or put it back into the company, or both. And if it goes back into the company, it means the company becomes worth more. Okay? So it's really the same difference. So you're really looking at earnings. What the company does with the earnings, pays them out or puts in the company, helps determine what you should be willing to pay for the stock. So here's annual revenue of Google, 2002 for 2019. So once again, look at these early years. Doubling. From here and then here to here, doubling. Here to here, like almost tripling for 2 years. Now we're at 136 to 160, so like about a 20%. There's about a 20%. There's about a 30%, and so on. So the growth rate eventually is going to have to level off. Okay, so we're at the top of page 4, and make sure I got it here. I'm sorry, I meant to say page 3. We're at the top of page 3. And we're looking at if Apple, once again, just paid. So that means this is D of 0, $2. And so I've given you a timeline on your outline. So I would, whatever it looks like, something like that. Okay, so I would have 0 up here, and I would say $2 right there. And then you're going to have to figure out, okay, how many years of your first step. So what is your first step? Figure out the dividends. Okay, so dividends are going to grow 30% for 3 years, and then it's going to switch. After year 3, it's going to grow 6% forever. Okay, what is the price today if your required rate of return is 13%? And that's all written there on your piece of paper. So I want you to put me on pause, and I want you to figure out the dividends to at least year 4. And that is critical to understand why it's 4 and not 3, and not 2 and not 5. So figure out why it's 4. So go ahead and do that. Put me on pause, and then we'll continue. Okay, so we go to year 4 because at year 4 is when the stock dividends transfer over into a constant growth forever. So to be able to do the constant growth model, we need that first dividend, that D of 1. In this case, it's going to be D of 4. We need that first dividend of that from that point until infinity, that it's going to grow at a constant rate. Okay? So here's what your timeline should look like for your dividends. Okay, so make sure you have all those. These are at 30% each, and then this one's going to be at times 1.06 for 1 year growth. So you can pause it, whatever, and check out all those. Okay, now what I want you to do is figure out what this formula is doing right here. Okay? This formula, by the way, that we're going to solve right here comes from the constant growth model. So you're going to look at the constant growth, and it's what we call the terminal value. Terminal value. It's the value of the stock at the point at which the dividends are going to grow at a constant rate forever. Now I know that's kind of fast, I'm talking a lot here, but you'll see terminal value down near the bottom of your page kind of gives a little bit more definition. Okay? So if you look on this slide, you'll see I have things color coded. So that's to give you a clue what this is going to equal right here. So see if you can just kind of use what I'm telling you about constant growth, the colors, and whatever to figure out that answer. Okay, so here's the answer, 66, and we're taking the dividend. So this is dividend from year 4, and this is R minus G. That's the constant growth model. So what that is saying is the price in year 3 for this stock, if this is what you would value the stock at, if you wanted to make a 13% return and you think that it's going to grow at 6%, the dividends are going to grow at 6% starting in year 4 and grow forever. So you're going to have a number out here, 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 here forever. The 66.57 would be what the price is in year 3. That's why I'm trying to kind of put this underneath year 3. Now, that's half of solving for price of year 0. So now what we've done is we've taken all the dividends from year 4 and into the future and lumped them all into one price of $66.57. Now we've got all these other dividends we have to deal with. And all we're going to do is bring them back. This arrow means present value. We're going to bring them back each individually. So there's multiple ways to do that. We're using R of 13%, so we could like divide the 2.6 times 1.13, 1.13 squared, and so on. We can take our calculator, time value calculator, and say that's future value for 1 year. What's the present value? Or we could use our cash flow function. Cash flow function says you have different amounts in different years. What's the net present value of all those? Okay? So how do we do that? Well, what this slide represents is if we did each one of these individually. So if I brought the 260 back, the present value would be 230. If I brought the 338, the present value would be 265, and so on. So the value of the stock would be the value, the present value of all the future dividends. So we were going to add these all up, and we'd get 5413. Now, I'll show you the cash flow here in a minute, but one thing, you got to write this down and make note of that. Do not add in D of 0. So this $2 didn't make it into that list there. All we're doing is we need that $2 to get to 260 and so on, but it does not get it added in there because remember, it's always like it just got paid. So we just assume, okay, that's not in the price because we're looking at all, the price represents all the future dividends, okay? Okay, so real quickly, let's show you how to do the cash flow. So the cash flow would be, cash flow 0 would be 0 because we don't add in the $2. Cash flow 1 would be 230. Cash flow 2 would be 265. Now here's where it gets tricky. What is cash flow 3? Cash flow 3. Is it 439? Is it 66? Is it 466? What do you put in? Well, it definitely is 439. Is the 66 included in it? Well, where is the 66? It is the price in year 3. So we would add 439 and 66.57 together to get cash flow in year 3. And that's it. So you'd add those two, then you hit your NPV button and whatever. The 466 does not become cash flow year 4 because it's already been factored into this price of 66. So it's already been used. So that's it. There's 1, 2, and cash flow year 3. And if you hit the NPV button, with an R of 13% or an IY of 13, you should get $54.13. Okay, the second problem, same situation. So on your sheet there, in the middle there, it's referring to the same data up above. All we're going to do is change, it says there, for the next 3 years, the growth is going to be 0. So that means, so on your timeline, you're just going to have $2 every year for the next 3 years. Stays the same, $2. And then it's going to grow at 6%. Okay? So it's just another problem identical to so you're going to work it the exact same way as the top of the sheet, except you're just going to use 222 instead of 260, 338, and 439. Okay? So work the same problem the way you just worked the last one and see if you can get the right answer. Put me on pause. Okay, so here's the terminal value. $30.29. There are, now you'll never see these numbers if you're using the cash flow function, which is fine. I'm just showing you kind of the back end what your calculator is doing. But the bottom line number should be 2571 or thereabout. Maybe due to rounding might be a little bit different. Okay? So the terminal value, once again, is the future point in time where all cash flows we expect at a stable growth rate. Okay? And it's not in your book, but if you're a finance major in particular, you will have this term in other classes. So that would be the terminal value right there. That's the point at which we changed from kind of a really steep or super normal growth, and then to this point where this is the constant growth right here. Okay, that's it. Okay, here's another practice problem down at the bottom of page 3. So all the data is there on your page. You can read it. You can put me on pause. So the first question is, find the expected future price at the beginning of the constant growth period. This would be what we call the terminal value right there. So 967. And then find the present value of all the expected cash flows. So once again, this would be cash flow 1. This, I'm sorry, not that. This would be cash flow 1. Remember, cash flow 0 is always 0 when we do these problems. We don't include this in the cash flows. This would be cash flow 2, and this would be cash flow 2 because they are in the same time period. This number is already included in there, so we don't need to put it into our cash flow system. And then that's it. NPV it, and you should get a price of $867. Sorry, that doesn't show up too well. I need to get a different color there. $867 is price of 0. Okay. Okay, changing gears a little bit. So the last thing we're going to cover is the required return. Okay, solving for R. So we've always here recently been primarily solving for P, price, sometimes the growth rate, but anyway, generally price. What if I gave you all the other information? So a firm stock, this is on your handout there, just paid, so there's D of 0. Dividends are expected to grow, there's G, and there's your P. So basically you have all the other variables except for R. So what is the required rate of return? So here's the formula. The formula, and it's kind of like we have two formulas once again. Do you have D of 0 or do you have D of 1? So G, and you can just write this down. Oh, I'm sorry, I have it wrong here. I don't know why it's, let me back this up. Okay, so R equals D of 1 divided by price plus the growth rate, okay? If you don't have D of 1, then you'll have to do this first part here because you have to adjust the D of 0, okay? So there's the math right there. You take in the price, which is right there, dividing it into 1 plus times the 1 plus the growth rate, and you're going to get 15%. So another way of looking at that is when we call this the dividend yield. So what is the dividend yield? I give you the answers there on your page. The dividend yield says, okay, we're going to get, after 1 year, we're going to get $1.05. we invested today, if I invest $10.50 and at the end of the year I get $1.05, I am making a 10% return. That's like saying the yield on my dividend is 10%. The return I'm going to get on what we call the capital gains is the value that the stock price should be growing. G is the grow. So when you buy a stock, you can make money two ways. One is the dividend, and two is the price growing. So this 15% is based on 5% for capital gains and 10% for dividend yield. Okay? Now, at the bottom of your page it says formulas on the quiz. So I would typically provide these formulas. Of course, you have them right there. You can have these in front of you when you're working the quiz. Okay? So that is it for Chapter 8, Stocks.